Ba-da-da-da-da-da. Dungeons and Dopamine. Ta-da!
Welcome to Dungeons and Dopamine, episode 46. This is Bree.
I'm Jess.
And we're here with some dopamine.
Yay!
For your week.
And your heart. I don't know why I always have to add something. It never works out. Like...
It always works out, Jessica.
Aw, thanks.
Always.
Oh, you're following your shirt. Be a nice person.
I have
human.
to be a nice human, yes.
We lived.
We did.
The sun thing.
We did not live through the sun. But we definitely lived through the eclipse.
That was the moon thing, really.
Yeah.
If you want to get to it.
There was no apocalypse. I have heard only a few reports from the path of totality. It didn't sound like it was too horrific, the traffic and all of that.
So, I was watching TikTok, and it was before Easter. I just held it until now.
Because there are just times we can only talk when it's on air now.
Exactly. And she was talking about, she like stitched, which is when you react to a video after the video is over.
Thank you for explaining that to me.
Absolutely. So they showed a video of someone putting together an Easter basket. And, like, I'll admit, it's probably not what I'd give my kid, but she went on to, like, first thing she did was like, I don't usually voice my opinion about this. And I was immediately like, yeah, you do. And she went on to just be like, this is for an 8-year-old. What happened to like, jump ropes and blah, blah, blah. And that's an exact reenactment.
Is she 90 or 35?
She was our age. And the basket was crazy. Like, it had a Stanley Cup and Lululemon stuff and, like, stuff you typically wouldn't buy. I wouldn't buy an 8-year-old. But as I watched it, I was like, I just don't care what you think about some random stranger's kid's Easter basket. Like, I don't have any emotion about, aside from, like, I wouldn't do that for my kid. Mm-hmm. That's the end of it. And I was just like, what spurred you to get on the internet and be like, this is my opinion? No one cares.
Apparently people do, because this has become like a horrific, I don't know if it's a trend or if it's just like, I feel like everybody feels like they're speaking into just like a speaker box. And it just, like, somebody somewhere is sitting there listening to all the, you remember the movie, you're right, I do cut myself off 100 times a sentence. Wow. That was like 4 in a row.
There's this episode in How I Met Your Mother where they find out things about themselves or about their partners, and then you hear glass shattering.
I think I have seen that.
And I feel like that just happened to you.
It did. That was intense even for me. So the movie is, let's see if I can work my way backwards. It's We're Back, the dinosaur movie.
Yes, okay.
It's still one of my top favorite kid. I've made Connor watch it like 3 times. So in that movie, the professor has it set up so he hears all the wishes.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
I feel like these people think that's how the internet exists. Like, somebody somewhere just hears all these voices come through that's like, I don't like this. I don't like that. This makes me sad. This makes me angry. And that's all the internet has become.
And it's not like, maybe I'm trying to, like, give myself an out because we have a podcast and that's sort of all we do. Like the other day when I said I don't believe orbs are ghosts, they're dust, my cousin was like, no, they're not, they're ghosts. And so,
is that her actual voice?
That's absolutely exactly what she sounds like, Ange. And so, I mean, I guess that's kind of what we're doing, but it felt like at least we're doing it with a purpose.
And we typically don't
make fun of 8-year-olds
and other people's ideas.
Yeah.
Like, to an extent sometimes. And there are some opinions we don't agree with, but I'm not judging other people's Easter baskets or Christmas presents or creative ideas they do for their children. Connor didn't get an Easter basket from us. We told him the Easter bunny left us tickets to go to Brickfest, and that's what works for our family. I saw Easter baskets that still had like the jump ropes and the sidewalk chalk and the bubbles and the candy, and that's beautiful and reminds me of childhood, and I love that.
But if it makes your 8-year-old happy to get a Stanley and you can afford to give your 8-year-old a Stanley, who cares?
Is your kid drinking water out of it? Because that's awesome.
Right? I don't care. Like, I love Connor. I don't care what you got him for Easter. Was he happy that day? Great.
Exactly.
You could have given him a goat, and if it made him happy, it would have been like, that's cool.
Next year, I'm totally celebrating Easter by giving Connor a goat. This works for me and him.
Exactly. Exactly. No more no's. So, I don't know. It just rubbed me the wrong way. It felt like a grown woman making fun of an 8-year-old or judging another parent.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, we all do it. It happens. But, like, shut up. I watched it and was like, why am I watching it? I don't care what you think about that person's Easter basket. They already bought it. What? Has it hurt you physically or mentally or emotionally? No. So shut up. Anyway, that's my negative Nancy Wednesday treat. So the dog man in Michigan went to the doctor the other day.
Do you know what he found out?
What?
He has POTS. Just kidding.
Bum, bum.
I have POTS.
Bum, bum, bum.
Yes.
Like flower pots.
Surprise! Now this will do triple duty when we give out tiny pots at
Right?
the Comic-Con events.
I hope everyone who ever plants anything in those tiny pots is like, nah, Dungeons and Dopamine.
That's what I assume happens.
Absolutely.
So I finally got a diagnosis for all of my health
Finally.
issues that have been going
Finally.
on. And it's POTS.
Which, how long have you and I both... I remember messaging you one day and being like, do you think it could be this? And you were like, are you in my house?
That was at least a few months ago. So we've known that this was going to be the diagnosis, and it feels very validating to finally
Yes.
like see it on paper and talk to
yes.
a medical professional that's like, yeah, you have this weird POTS thing. So I'm going to talk about it for 2 episodes apparently, because all I've been doing for the last 6 months or so, or 4 months, is learning about it. And it's becoming more and more common due to COVID. It's actually really highly associated with long COVID. So maybe this will help someone else that needs to get that point in the right direction. So POTS is basically when your body thinks that changing positions becomes a life or death situation.
Oh my gosh.
And it is exactly as ridiculous as that sounds. It stands for postural orthostatic tachycardic syndrome. And if you are not a medical professional, to break that down into layman's terms, postural is just like sitting, standing, laying, like whatever position you're in. Orthostatic is blood pressure, tachycardic means fast heart rate, and then syndrome is like a combination of symptoms that combine into one disease or disorder. For me, it generally just presented as not feeling well all the time, and I'll talk more about what my symptoms were when I get to that part, but it's ridiculous, you guys. And so I have an inkling that I've probably had it most of my life, and as I talk about my symptoms, I feel like you, out of everybody in my life, are the one that can agree with me the most. But I think it got worse after my pregnancy. It actually got better during my pregnancy. And I actually read during this research that about 50% of people with POTS have less symptoms while they're pregnant, and it has to do with increased blood in your system during pregnancy. So that tracks. And then in the last 4 years, I feel like it's intensified until last November, when it kind of went over the edge and gave me a reason to push harder to get a diagnosis. So here's my story about what POTS is. And I will say that I do have a pretty mild form of it, or a pretty mild case of it right now. It can go into remission, and it can reemerge later in life depending on your life and your symptoms and your stress levels. But up to 25% of people actually become disabled or even up to bedridden from this. So POTS is a form of a dysautonomia, or an issue with your autonomic nervous system, which is, of course, the system in your body that's supposed to do everything automatically, like your breathing and your heart rate and your sweating and your blood pressure. You know, all those things we're not supposed to have to think about. And POTS is only one variation of these autonomic nervous disorders. It is probably the most commonly known one at this point, and is really a combination of other types of autonomic disorders combined into one. So POTS specifically means that your body reacts inappropriately when you're changing postures. The longer answer is that simple things like getting out of bed in the morning or getting up out of a chair can cause high heart rate and a change in your blood pressure, which then leads to other issues like dizziness, lightheadedness, fainting, headaches, pain issues. And straight from the Cleveland Clinic's website, the more scientific version of this, to kind of summarize it, is so when you stand up, about 10 to 15% of your blood just kind of settles in your abdomen and your legs and your arms, you know, away from your heart. And typically, in a normal person, your leg muscles will kind of start to pump that blood back up to your heart, and then your autonomic nervous system kicks in and raises your heart rate just a little bit to get your blood pumping, to get it back to your heart and up to your brain so that you can function as a normal human being. And it also typically releases some hormones, epinephrine and norepinephrine, which are your adrenaline hormones, and that's what tells your heartbeat to get faster. So it adjusts for how you change. Now, when you have POTS, it becomes a vein dilation issue. So when I stand up, or when I go from laying down to standing up, more of my blood will rush to my legs, and then it just kind of gets stuck there for one reason or another. And there's different types of POTS that I'll get into later, so that kind of determines on why the things don't react the way they're supposed to. But so my body knows that my blood isn't where it's supposed to be, and it sends out that adrenaline rush to try to get my heart beating faster.
Emergency.
And then my veins are still like, nah, we're good. And so my heart sends out some more adrenaline to try to get that system going. So people end up with a high heart rate, blood pooling. So a lot of blood will pool in my legs. My feet will get really swollen or turn red. My hands will do that. And then all the symptoms that go with not having the right amount of blood in the places it's supposed to be. So brain fog, fainting, lightheadedness. And for some people, the longer they stand up, the worse this becomes. So some people can only stand up for 5 minutes, and then the symptoms become so overwhelming they pass out or they have to lay back down. People that are being treated or that have their bodies aren't as quite severe will just kind of adjust. I noticed in my research, and you'll be able to confirm this. A lot of people with POTS will sit with their legs in their chair, or they cross their legs, or they'll like twist their legs, and these are all measures to compensate for the blood flow not working the way it's supposed to, that we do without even really realizing that we're doing it. So now our body is in a stress response to standing up because the blood's not doing what it's supposed to, it's not in the places it's supposed to be, and it kind of just panics.
Do you get that feeling? Is it the same as when you stand up and feel dizzy because you've stood too fast?
Yes.
Except it's forever.
More constant. Yes.
Okay.
Not for everybody, but for a lot of people,
Okay.
yes. It's
For you,
that
too, yeah.
pre-syncope feeling. So mine is especially, I don't get it all the time, but it's especially bad if I go from like sitting on the floor or laying on the floor to standing up. You get that dizzy, like, whoa, wait a second. So it's estimated that 1 in 3 million people have POTS. But like I said, that number is increasing since COVID. So symptoms. So the biggest problem with POTS, and as I read this list, you will notice that this could be literally anything, anyone, or a combination of 100 different things.
So it's like when I read the symptoms of narcissists, and I'm looking at it and I'm like, oh crap.
Right. So everybody right now is going to think they have POTS, which, I mean, after the last 4 years we've had as a society, it's possible. Obviously, tachycardia or a high heart rate, that is a requirement since it's in the name of the syndrome. And that high heart rate typically can lead to dizziness, fainting, but only 20 to 40% of cases actually involve full fainting. So a lot of people think you have to have the fainting to have POTS, but it's actually a small amount of people that have that. Fatigue, brain fog, headaches or migraines, heart palpitations, anxiety, tremors, excessive sweating, shortness of breath, chest pain, stomach issues, blood pooling, insomnia, and pain issues, which is, pretty much everything. And very broad. This could be
very broad.
I mean, this could be a bad day. With POTS, it's either pretty often, pretty constant, or you can see a cycle in it, like flares. You get flares of it. And then these symptoms are often made worse by triggers. So a lot of the triggers are things like standing and walking, obviously, since it's a postural change. And like I said before, this can get worse the longer you remain upright. Heat is a big trigger, so it could be, hot showers or hot baths, hot tubs, saunas, just hot weather outside being how your body is feeling. So whether you're sick or on your period, it can cause your POTS to get worse. Eating large or carb-heavy meals, alcohol, sugar, dehydration, lack of sleep, and basically any other relatively fun, unhealthy, or enjoyable thing that you want to do with your life. Again, everybody probably feels a lot of these symptoms all the time. With POTS, it's going to be more regular, and especially things like heat and standing and walking is going to increase that, or you're going to see those as triggers. As you mentioned, it's taken me a few months, even though you and I figured out my diagnosis, it's taken me a few months just to get that diagnosis, and it was even longer than that before I even got close to knowing what was going on with me, or even knowing that I really had something wrong with me. For most people, most of the stories I read or the statistics I saw, it can be upwards of 5 years just to get a diagnosis, and that was made significantly harder by the fact that there wasn't even a diagnosis code for it until 2022.
What the heck?
Right? And this is an actual testable thing. Like, they have numbers to look for and they have tests they can do. So it's not like fibromyalgia that we know exists, but we can't really prove exists. So there is treatment for this, and there is ways to diagnose this, yet it's still kind of like not well known or not believed in, or just one of those things that doctors aren't willing to go the extra mile for, maybe. It also falls in kind of a weird area of medicine. So it's not something that your general practitioner is probably going to diagnose you with. They're going to send you off to a specialist. But you typically end up at a cardiologist because it always starts with a high heart rate. And so they send you to cardiology because they're the people that deal with high heart rates. So we're getting a lot of, in fact, the specialist I'm seeing is in a cardiology center. But there's also like a neurology end to this, and it because it's your autonomic nervous system. So some people go that way and they get diagnosed there, but it kind of lays somewhere in the middle of this cardiology, nervous system, and just general practitioner area, which means nobody really wants to take responsibility for it, and you're kind of getting shuffled around. There are some really good autonomic dysfunction centers in the United States, but it's like the Cleveland Clinic and the Mayo Center, and places like that it's hard to get into, and there's, a year-long waiting list.
Tons of travel.
A bunch of travel, very expensive. Insurance doesn't want to cover it. I got lucky enough to somehow get a side referral for a specific test in Grand Rapids and get into a physician and a nurse practitioner that are kind of spearheading this autonomic dysfunction center in Grand Rapids.
Well, and your doctors really resisted, your general practitioner and stuff really resisted this diagnosis.
Yes. Well, and for 4 years, we've just been pursuing it as side effects to my ADHD medication.
Right.
So I had nearly every symptom on this list, but it was all being overshadowed by the fact that I was on a stimulant medication, and all of these symptoms can also be explained as side effects to stimulants. Side note, POTS can be made worse by stimulants. So,
fun fact.
Yeah. I will say that mine got really bad earlier this year after a pretty stressful couple of weeks. And I will say that when I started really pushing, and once I was off my stimulants, they were more willing to take me seriously. But every time I mentioned POTS, it would just, that's, nobody really knows what's going on with that, or we don't treat that here, or it's probably not that. So I'm not saying, go lie to your doctor about how to get yourself taken seriously, but definitely
advocate.
Yeah. Don't
heavily
underplay your symptoms. Especially as women, we are taught to underplay our pain. We're taught to underplay our discomfort. And in these situations, you can't do that. But you also have to find that fine line where you're not overreacting, because then they just tell you that you're hysterical and anxious, which is another thing I was told for a little while, is that this was all just anxiety.
Heard that.
Mm-hmm. So to get the full diagnosis, there is a little bit of things have to be ruled out to make sure that it's just POTS. Because as uncomfortable and ridiculous as this can be, it's really not a life-threatening disorder or disease. It's something that can be managed through lifestyle changes and a little bit of medication through the most part, which I won't talk about until next week, because somehow I can talk about this for hours. Because it's, like I said, it starts with cardiology, because it starts with a high heart rate. You'll end up getting all of the cardiology tests, EKGs. I had an echocardiogram, chest CT, chest x-ray. They also did a whole bunch of blood work and urinalysis and other types of scans. And they're ruling out any heart issues. They're ruling out kidney issues, liver issues. They ruled out cancer, a couple different types of cancer. They ruled out a tumor called a pheochromocytoma, which can cause your adrenal glands to overreact and cause that tachycardia and high blood pressure. So they had to really rule out quite a list of things before we could even get to the diagnosis.
And a scary list of things. I remember you telling me some of these, and I'm like, oh, I'm not going to freak her out, but I was freaking
right.
out.
And
I hated that.
And every time, the craziest part is my blood work is mostly normal. So as awful as I was feeling and as terrible as I felt day to day, my blood work was showing that I was maybe a little dehydrated, or it would be just a little bit off to where my doctor would be like, that's strange, but nothing that immediately sent people into oh my gosh, get her into surgery right now, or oh my gosh, this looks like cancer, we have to panic, which was great, but also awful, because it was more of oh, well, things aren't quite right, but nothing's really wrong, so just let me know if you keep not feeling good.
Yeah, as much as every test that came back and said no cancer, no tumor disease,
it was just another non-answer.
Yeah.
I ended up, this is how I got my glasses. All of this led me down the binocular vision dysfunction, which also turned out to be a thing I have. So I do feel very healthy now beyond this, because I know that pretty much every other system in my body has checked out okay. So I guess that's the good news. And then the kind of the gold standard for diagnosing POTS at this point is what's called a tilt table test. And that's exactly what it sounds like.
Really?
They don't like flip you upside down, but you go in, you lay on a bed, they hook you up to an EKG and a blood pressure cuff, and then they strap you to the table, or they put an IV in, and then they strap you to the table and they stand it up. And they put it at like 70 degrees, so you're just leaning back a little bit to try not to engage like your leg muscles, so you're not standing. And then they just stand you there for 20 minutes and watch you. And they try to make you uncomfortable. They're trying to mimic
like one of my horror stories.
And there's 3 people in the room, and they're like staring at you. Their only concern for the next 30 minutes is how you feel. And they're trying to trigger you, essentially. They're trying to give you the worst symptoms that you've had so they can see what your body does during this time. So to diagnose during that test, if your heart rate jumps 30 or more points without a large drop in your blood pressure, then you have POTS. That's it.
Wow.
That's the only thing they need to do to diagnose you, is spend 30 to 45 minutes lifting you up on a table and watching what you do. If your blood pressure also goes up 20 to 30 points in that time, then they suspect that you have a subtype of POTS that is hyperadrenogenic POTS, which is probably what I have. We're still waiting on that blood test. And I will go more into the subtypes next week as well. But that's it.
Wow.
It took me months to get a doctor to listen to me, to go through all of the rule-out tests, to wait to get in to do this tilt table test, because they only do 1 a day. And that's it.
It seems like, and I don't know the ins and outs of this kind of thing, but it seems like that should be the first test to rule out that, because they just strap you to a table,
right,
and hang you upside down.
And technically, they could do this in a regular office. They call it a poor man's tilt table test. You just lay down in your doctor's office and they hook you up to a blood pressure cuff, and then you stand up and they see what happens. And 9 times out of 10, from my reading and my research, that shows just as well as the tilt table test does.
Warmed you up in blankets and towels and stuff. Like, wow.
And you're not. So they for my test, they did draw blood in the middle of the test when my symptoms were bad, and then 10 minutes after, they had laid me back down and I had calmed down, and that's the test for that hyperpots, which is basically an overreaction of that adrenaline system again.
Hyperpots.
Sorry. I just like the word hyper in all the things I do.
That's really annoying. I'm really happy you have your diagnosis, but how freaking annoying.
Yes. This has been one of the most ridiculous journeys of my life.
Well, that, and I don't even want to get started on the fight that you had to. I just realized that every time I rock in this chair, it goes,
It's just going to sound like Jessica's an angry old man sitting on her front porch.
Rocking chair, yelling at the kids to get off my lawn.
Yeah. So next week, I will talk about the subtypes of POTS and the treatment of POTS, kind of a little bit about what causes it, and then some other diseases or disorders that are often in conjunction with POTS.
So, I know somewhere you should not go with your POTS.
Is it in Michigan?
It is in Michigan.
Yes.
And actually it sounds super cool and we should probably go there. But
I'm in. I don't even care where. I'm in.
So, we're going to move. I wrote southier.
Perfect.
We are moving into the land of the trolls, which if you are not from Michigan and you're listening, means we're in the mitten now and out of the UP, which I just did with my hands.
I wish I was recording so we could put that on the social media.
So we're going to Traverse City. Yeet. So in 1882, an architect out of Detroit was hired to design a hospital for the mentally ill. It actually was pretty cool. It was started off under the premise of someone named Dr. Munson, who felt that all patients should have a ton of sunlight and fresh air. So it was big windows. They did have bars on the outside because they were mentally ill patients, but they could open for air to come through, and it was just a very bright, seemingly really nice place.
I was gonna say, this seems like my sort of place.
Right? It just wait.
My plants would love it there.
That gets better. So the main structure of this hospital would be large and advanced for northern Michigan. It would be almost 1/4 mile long, over 300,000 square feet. And it was over 70 feet tall at the roof ridge. So I'm thinking the peak is what I'm guessing. It had central heat and electricity, which was a big deal back then.
Right.
And then it had a really interesting ventilation system, which was sort of... Sorry, I don't know why that was funny.
A really good ventilation system.
You're just providing sound effects.
I'm gonna get one of those keyboards. The different...
Snake Jess. Okay, anyway. They had sort of a cool ventilation system that was a set of tunnels, and it was based on really, really rudimentary knowledge on germs back then.
Really?
Which is super cool.
That is cool.
So I'm going to read this quote exactly. This is from the villagetc.com. Sorry, it's all one word, and it looks like the evil agitk. This is a direct quote from the evil agitk.
Super legit website.
Absolutely. Large fans would force air through the underground tunnels into the basement and up flues into various parts of the building. Using the chimney effect, the air would then move through the ducts within the attic to exit via the ventilators known today as the village's iconic spires. Which is super cool for
That's
the 1800s.
amazing, yeah.
Even late 1800s. It's still super cool. So they began the construction in 1883 and started seeing patients in 1885. By 1990, it was already being expanded with several standalone cottages. So Dr. James Munson, who I'd mentioned before, believed in beauty therapy. He did not allow physical restraints or violence. The restraints could be used in situations that it would keep a person safe, but it wasn't just like you come in with, but back then you weren't
Nurse
hysterical
Ratchet.
and yeah. He felt people could be healed by beauty, and this was pretty well before the use of psychiatric drugs. So he was kind of just doing his best. The residents were able to hike around the property grounds. They had bands come and had dances, and they had baseball teams that they would go and play with local, places.
This place is sounding better and better.
I know, right?
This sounds like a great vacation.
So they had a dining hall, and it looked physically more like a restaurant. It had linens on the tables and vases with flowers in it. The whole place had a work therapy program, so you could try to work to get better. And it kind of sustained itself. One of the fun facts that I think you'll like a lot is that they had farms, and they had a prized cow that still has a memorial on the property.
What was the cow's name?
I don't remember. I know, I'm sorry.
You're usually so good at that.
She had 9 babies.
Oh.
9 prized babies. So, maybe kind of started to take a little bit of a turn. It was hard to get more specific information. Part of me thinks that's because they run ghost tours and just general tours, and I wonder if they're trying to keep the information off the interwebs.
That's a good point.
And I don't know if anybody has that kind of power. Disney does, but I don't know if anyone else does.
Oh, I'm sure.
But I also feel like they didn't want to tarnish the image of this really nice hospital.
Right.
So in the 1950s, a new doctor came in. He was known for his 3-minute lobotomy.
Oh,
yeah.
That's what you want to be known for being quick at.
And I know that was sort of a practice back then, but it really doesn't make me feel like it's okay. Like,
I agree.
It didn't seem like he used this therapy on his patients in this hospital, but he did use some chemical therapies on them.
Okay.
There was one called, I'm going to read a direct quote on this one. This is from restlessviking.com, which I greatly enjoy.
Which sounds like the best.
Chemical restraint. Experiments he called tender, loving care. He soothed these residents with Thorazine, Ritalin, FDA approved in 1955, and insulin. The doctor himself, this is no longer quoted, but the doctor himself had been in 5 different mental institutions. He'd been in mental institutions 5 times in 22 years. Which, like, is it better or worse? Like, do you want a nurse who's had the same thing? Like, do you want a labor nurse who's been through labor?
True.
Or are you content with the, nurse who hasn't and maybe has just seen a lot of labor?
No, the expert on labor.
This is dulling it down a lot because mental treatment is very different, but it's
especially
a very unusual
back then.
thing. Yeah. Oh my gosh. Yes. In the 1960s, for a brief time, they used psychedelics, but they did stop when that was outlawed.
Oh, good.
I mean, at least.
And I mean, a lot of people were using psychedelics as treatment.
And they didn't all stop either.
True.
As the facilities aged, the treatments became more and more questionable. The facility was closed in 1989.
Not that long ago.
Right, no. And unfortunately, when it closed, it just literally closed its doors, and anyone who was a patient there was essentially homeless.
Of course.
The homeless population in Traverse City at that point spiked.
Oh.
Without taking a lot more time on its history, the building is now renovated. It is called, I think, the Common. It is apartments, shops, and restaurant. They still do a lot of tours, especially in like the tunnels.
Okay.
My cousin has been into the tunnels.
Oh, really?
She did not take a ghost tour, but just a general tour. Said that the tunnels were still very scary. And then they did like this like prank where the person pretended that the door shut and turned off the lights. Which I'm like, if I didn't pay for the ghost tour, I don't want the ghost tour experience.
No, thank you.
So, in the later years of the asylum, as I said, the treatments were rumored to get worse, and there were shock therapies, lobotomies, poor treatment of the adults, and children being mistreated in a lot of different ways. So
you always got to ruin it.
I know, right? Always, every time.
People always have to screw this up for me.
That's why we can't have nice things, people. So with all of that being said, of course the place is wildly haunted.
Yay!
Else I wouldn't be talking about it. There's said to be a portal to hell.
Oh.
Beneath something there called the hippie tree.
This just gets better and better, Jessica.
I want to tell you about the hippie tree.
Please.
Before we move on. So the hippie tree is a willow, which is personally my favorite kind of tree. The tree has fallen down, but for some reason, people painted the tree. Local painters just painted it.
They were like, look at this nice tree. It'll make a nice canvas for my new idea.
So for some reason, generations of painters have put neon paint on this tree. There are layers of it on the tree.
That's amazing.
It is incredibly cool looking. Like I said, it has fallen over, and now it is a place of local folklore. as I just said. This tree, the reason it's even brought up is because it's part of the hiking trails that the people used to be able to hike. And now it's covering one of the trails. I'm tying it all together.
I was say it's not just like a tree.
It's not a tree
around the corner
in our town. I thought it was fun.
I just really wanted to talk about it and didn't know how to add it in.
It is said that you can hear screams and voices throughout the building.
Oh, good.
Lights turn on and off by themselves. And this happened even when there was no power running to the building. Apparitions of children and adults have been reported. A priest is said to have committed suicide by hanging, and he appears in the room that he died in.
Ooh.
I had looked through and read a bunch of autopsy reports.
What?
And he was not the only death. There were a lot of suicides, and you can find the report of this dude. It is a little eerie just to, I don't know why, confirm that it was something that actually happened.
Right.
Not just a story that someone's come up with.
Well, especially after, like, some of the ones you've talked about that when they did try to look for the actual, like,
there's nothing
proof
there.
of history. They're like, no one's ever been to this island.
I love ruining my own stories.
Right.
So it's very refreshing to have at least an autopsy report. Construction workers have reported seeing things while they were working on it, and some have become so frightened that they refuse to return. This one, I just read it and it gave me chills.
Oh my god.
A disfigured creature appears in the underground tunnels, the ones that were used for airflow. Ugh.
Did your cousin see one?
She didn't say so. Maybe she's too terrified. Maybe it threatened her. Some of the very, very recent stories that I've heard, and I have a lot of stories. Like this, I've only got 3 pages of notes for this one, and then pages of stories. So I'll read through some of those in a minute. Now that it's like shops and restaurants, people have had toilet paper rolls thrown at them over doors while they're in the bathroom alone.
Oh no.
There's a video that I watched where they claim that, I didn't listen to this video, but I read in the comments because it freaked me out. They caught a little girl saying, "I'm right behind you." An instrument being played and a voice speaking.
No. Unacceptable.
Investigators playing back their recordings have heard people insisting loudly that they leave immediately. People in there have heard doors slamming. Several articles that I found talked about how the authors feel heaviness or uneasy while they're on the grounds. One said that when they entered, often as teens, it was always cold, even midsummer in the middle of the day. Which, if you know Michigan well, you know that it's not cold in our winters.
Right.
Or summers.
It is definitely cold in our winters.
Our winters are fine.
Never cold.
So
I had to look this place up to make sure I haven't been there.
It looks amazing now. My mom went and she said it was super cool.
Really? I'm freaked out now. By the way, I want you to know that while you were talking about that, Carly's playing in your backyard, and I just kind of caught her out of the corner of my eye and nearly panicked.
So while I'm over here giving myself goosebumps, you're literally having an actual heart attack.
Yes.
So I'm going to go through some of these stories. These are all off of websites. I must tell you that I'm a devout skeptic, but what I saw I will never forget as long as I live. It was about a 15-minute walk to the tree. As we ventured out, it felt as if people were watching us. The closer we came to the tree, the more it felt like someone or something did not want us there. We kept hearing sounds of crashing branches and scuffles in the distance. The closer we got, the more strange things became.
The ghosts don't want you to hear that one either.
Sorry. I'm trying to figure out what they saw. They buried the lead. They're just like, today only some of the buildings are still standing. I strongly discourage anyone from exploring anything.
He doesn't want to tell you. It was that horrific.
There's truly some form of evil that is attached to the forest and the asylum. Please stay away. That was the ghost writing that. So that was a dud.
Now I want to write a book about ghosts that figure out how to use the internet. And they're the ones planting the story. Like, maybe it'll have to be like a kid's graphic novel.
Just leave Beetlejuice out of it, because otherwise, or demons out of it, because otherwise you're encroaching on Beetlejuice.
Right.
Otherwise,
It'll be like ghosts posting reviews about ghost
you
tours.
should call it Ghostwriter, and that used to be my favorite TV show as a kid.
I remember.
And you can pretend that it's a ghost. Pretend, because all writing isn't pretend when you're writing a fake book. Let's just stop me talking, okay? I lived not a block from the state hospital for a year at a women's center. I was outside one night mid-October and I saw what looked to be a satanic ritual. It really freaked me out and I watched it for a while but got scared and left. This place has definitely got messed up energy. This is not a ghost story, but a really interesting and sort of sad story. Back when patients used to be able to walk around the neighborhood, someone let themselves into my grandparents' house. My grandma found him in their bedroom trying on her clothes. She helped him find an outfit, called the asylum while he was changing, and then came and retrieved him. It used to be a very laid-back place.
I love that. I love the idea that the whole town is just like, oh, we take care of them.
Like, what a way to way to go, Grandma. That's awesome.
Nowadays it would be like, someone got into my grandma's house, so she shot him.
Yep.
Yay.
This person also said on a sad note, several patients did just walk into the bay.
Oh, yeah.
During my visit to Traverse City in 2010, I took some pictures of the buildings. They turned out different than what I took a picture of. For example, I took a picture of the electric shock treatment room, and it looked all stretched out like taffy. There were no tours back then. We walked where we wanted. Nobody cared. As we left, we drove past a home that belonged to the main doctor, and there was a pale yellow spirit.
Huh. It's like the welcoming. Just like, bye. Thanks for coming.
Did you like my stretching of your photo? Love taffy.
I left you a present on your camera.
My older brother went there with a group of friends. They all heard footsteps following them from the inside. Then he said they heard a long moan with a bunch of different voices combined from high to low all at once.
Oh, that's weird.
They immediately ran out. They go on to say they visited there when they were younger, and it is a very strange place. They said that there was a creepy room that he remembers that was had a pile of old shoes. Makes me think of the Auschwitz area where they have all the shoes piled up, and it makes
That's probably what makes it even worse.
Yeah. I've never seen the hippie tree, but the hospital has a weird vibe. Same with the water tower. I've heard stories from people that have talked to the people renovating the old hospital. This was 4 years ago. And the workers say that they've had tools moved on them to different floors. I don't know. You just feel like you're being watched when you're there. Apparently there is also a story, and I did not find this, of a child who was killed by the hippie tree.
By the tree?
Yeah, I don't know if it was falling or if they climbed it and it broke or something, or if it's all just fake. I didn't find anything on it.
It's like the reverse of the giving tree?
Yeah, or it was like the Whomping Willow. Me and my family went here to visit. It was really cool. But when walking down a hall, this door starts shaking violently, and you could see under the door really well, and there were no feet or anything. It seems pretty ghostly to me. This one's kind of funny. I went in one time and found an abandoned room with the lyrics to Creep by Radiohead written on the wall. I came out to the car at like 3 a.m. and the song was playing on the radio.
Oh, that's creepy.
That would have freaked me out, but it does still kind of make me laugh.
Right?
My buddies and I have hours of video footage inside the buildings and one or two of the tunnels. They were small and had a lot of pipes running through them. This was 04 or 06, so we just got used to going in and knew many of the ways in there. We would sometimes go in daily to hang out. We have a lot of spirit orbs down there, which you know how I feel about that. This was just a special thing for me to show you. This is a picture someone took. someone claims they can see 4 ghosts in this picture. I only can see maybe someone there.
And that.
They said that's someone like laying on the ground looking at. This person was on the tour, snapped a picture and moved on. And getting goosies again.
Yeah, that is not my favorite picture ever. I will.
That lives on my phone. I'll put that picture up when we post this episode. This person said they're a photographer and someone wanted their high school senior photos outside of this building. And they were leaning on a door with a no trespassing sign, and all of a sudden they heard a metal bar banging around inside the building.
That would make me crap my pants.
Someone said, I believe it 100%. We took the tour last summer, and the men's cottage area, which were the cottages that were built after the main building, gave off such odd energy. As soon as you walked in, it was heavy on your chest. Myself, my mom, my aunt, my cousin all heard a male voice say, hello, in the same quarters.
That one's friendly. Hello.
Right?
Welcome to my home. I'm glad you could visit.
Okay. This person said they work in the Commons at Cordia, which I'm sorry, I'm not sure what that is. And some of the older people tell stories of little kids or old men in their room when there's no one else there.
Oh, perfect.
I have a photo I took in the facility here. I was sitting in an old bathtub, and it looks like there's a hand grabbing me. These are actually from TikTok, so they're just
nice.
little quick blurbs. Okay, it said, I'm gonna read it to you as is, and then I'll correct it and read it as it's supposed to be and use that as content. I'm one of the shops they built on this property. The radio changes on its own. Also, they have sentient shops.
That can post on the internet with the ghosts.
So I'm assuming, though they said I'm one of the shops, they meant I work at one of the shops?
Or in one of the shops,
maybe?
the radio
Yeah.
changes on its own.
So they said the shop, in the shop, the radio changes on its own. I sort of buried the lead there with that. Allegedly, the guy that wrote Wizard of Oz visited the Traverse City area while they were building the hospital, and that is where the yellow bricks come from the yellow brick road.
Aw, I like that. I don't know if I would willingly choose to live somewhere like that.
No. Also,
or like we've talked about like
the Cecil.
Yeah, the hotels and stuff. I don't know. I just, as brave as I am and as scientific, part of me does want to believe in ghost stories, maybe. I don't know. I just don't think I could do it.
I've heard like people say they think they have ghost activity and they'll just be like, no, you can't do that right now, and it will stop. But I'm like, no, I'm leaving.
No, I don't want to.
But yeah, it's terrifying. I want to shop there and just see if I can feel or see the grounds, talk to people, but I don't want to stay there.
I want to go find the hippie tree.
I also want to buy books.
Well, yeah. And plants.
Sure. So anyway,
and that was Dungeons and Dopamine Podcast.
You can listen to us anywhere you stream podcasts or on YouTube.
You can support us on Patreon at www.patreon.com/dungeonsdopamine.
You can find us on Facebook, TikTok, Twitter, Insta, and Reddit.
You can reach out to us at any of those social medias or at dungeonsdopamine@yahoo.com.
Dungeons and Dopamine is edited and published by Argyle Pigeon Productions. And that's all.
That's it.
Thank you, guys. We love you.
Okay, bye.
Bye.